Like, to those who are on the platform, I would say that is not a neutral space. It is actively destroying your soul. And if you aren't super intentional, it will, without you even knowing it, begin to degrade. And it's going to take a lot of intentionality. You won't even know it. Like, people come into that room and there's a social contract and they want to eat you, and there's a part of you that wants to eat the sheep. You need silence and solitude more than you know. You need to confess your sin to few trusted people more than you know. You need to find like your sacred pathways and be more extravagant about those than you probably think you need to be. And you need to do the work. Get down in the basement as soon as you can. It's hard to do that when you're in your 20s or even in your 30s, but as soon as you can, like, get back into your story, because there's a lot of the reasons you're doing what you're doing.
Welcome to episode 11 of the Leading Smart podcast, season 2, where we're talking all about 40 lessons in 40 years. I'm Holly Tate, and I'm joined by the one and only Tim Stevens.
Seems like we are just started the season and we're already at episode 11.
Seriously, how in the world did that happen?
It's amazing.
In today's episode, we're going to be centering around the lesson number 35 from the ebook, 40 Lessons in 40 Years, which is don't lead alone. Isolation is a silent killer in ministry. You need people who know the real you and love you anyway. That's so good. And so you're going to actually get to hear Tim interview what we're calling as Granger OGs. So the leadership team at Granger, and just going back down memory lane of those 20 years there. So I know I'm excited to be able to listen in, and I'm really looking forward to learning what you learned in that season with your Granger OGs, Tim.
Yeah, looking back 40 years, there's only a few seasons where it's like, man, everything was clicking on all cylinders and we were tight and we were unified and everything we were doing was working. And we had a number of years like that at Granger. I reached out to 4 of them and said, hey, would you come on and let's have a conversation together? And, we had to book it 2 months out because everyone's so busy. But we're going to have that conversation today, and I know you're going to enjoy it.
So listen in.
Hey, friends, as Holly and I just said, this episode's pretty special because I'm calling them the Granger OG. It's not all of them, but it's some friends that we traveled together for some pretty special years, some good, some hard, and we just want to unpack that a little bit. So really grateful. I asked all 4 of these leaders to jump in on this, and I figured if I can get 2 to say yes, that'd be great. And they all 4 said yes. It just took us about 3 years to find a date on the calendar. So glad you guys are here.
Great to be here.
Thanks. Good to be here.
You all.
Good to be
Yeah.
here.
So this is fun. So what I want to do first is just kind of start by reflecting on, again, I'm trying to unpack, it's 40 years of ministry, 20 of those I spent with you guys, and a really special time that I cherish to this day. So I really just want to try to back up the clock 15, 20 years, somewhere in there, and just kind of what did it look like. So I want to paint the picture for people on like what it was like. We can tell some stories. I want to really get kind of just authentic about, there were some hard times. We had years where this, everything was up and to the right. And we're all waking up every day. I have no idea what we're doing. We're just making stuff up and figuring it out together. And there was good sides of that, and there were shadow sides to that, right? And so I'd love to just help leaders that are in that now reflect on, what can they learn from us? So, and if at the end of the 40 minutes here or whatever, we just had fun together and no one learns anything, I'll call that a win. It'll be fun. So it'll be great. Let's start. I'd just like you give a picture kind of what your role was in this season that we're talking about. We'll start Mr. Waltz up top left on my screen. Tell us.
So as pastor of Connections, which I think we still contend, we were the first church to claim that title.
I don't know if we were, but I still think we were.
I think we were.
Impressions. Yeah. First impressions. It's yours, man.
Yeah. So Connections met, without embellishing, everything outside the auditorium and the programming of the service that related to adults was under my umbrella. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
So everything from guest services, first impressions, to groups, classes, care, counseling, all the things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I met a guy in Houston yesterday who came up and said, "Do you know Mark Waltz?" It was almost like he was like, "Do you know Taylor Swift?" You know, it was that kind of sense.
Yeah,
Like he
that's
was
what
in
it
awe.
was. Yeah, that
It was
happens a
totally
lot.
that.
Yeah.
Just
And
got
he just like
engaged to
you're
Kelsey, go Kansas City. Come on.
There's the connection. That's right.
I meant
He's
Taylor
gonna have
Kelsey. Sorry.
a home here
I-
now. We're gonna get another billionaire. Here in
There you go.
So glad I brought that up. Anyway, he was very formed by a lot of your work in those years, and so appreciate what you did there. Jason Miller,
Yeah, thanks.
you were no, you were older than that. Tell us about your time during that season.
Yeah, so when I joined the lead team at Granger, that's the same time that I stepped into leading creative arts for us. And so in our structure, everything inside the auditorium. So tech and production, and then worship and arts, and video and drama and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's great. And I think you and I first met, I think you were still in college at the time, which would have been what, late
Yeah, so
90s? I don't know.
no, I started interning in '03 when I was a junior in college.
Hmm.
Okay.
And then through a kind of a shakeup that none of us was expecting, in '04 I came on full time. And then it was a few years later, I was the worship leader. And then a few years later, I started leading that department that I was a part of.
And Jason was a teaching pastor for a number of years at Granger later on in that season as well. Kim Meyer.
Yeah. I helped run point and just like bring clarity on the communications. So anything going into the weekend or coming out of the weekend, how do we make it easy to find, and how do we make it easy to take next steps? And it wasn't just for the people on the weekend, it was also to try and keep us all connected as we're doing ministry together. Because it gets a lot's happening, a lot of balls are being thrown, and so trying to find that same end zone so we could grow and grow together. And that all went hand in hand with technology. So it's communications and IT, but really I was just a cheerleader for a brilliant IT director, and I think we made each other better. So there was that. I was a geek
I,
until I met our IT guy. And then I'm like, well, I'm not really a geek and I'm
I
not
know.
really a creative. I kind of float between the two and I know how to translate. And so that's kind of where I sat.
Yeah,
Sometimes I used to call myself a user advocate, probably, you know, how do
that makes
people use
sense.
the stuff that we're kicking out? You know, what are we spilling? Can people mop it up? Let's look at that usability and messaging and technology. And yeah.
I remember one of my earliest memories of you on staff, or actually right before you came on staff, was like, hey, Kim, can you come help us build a website? And like within about 3 minutes, you're like, we have some other things we need to talk about first, and helping us like reframe all of the communications and stuff from the top, from the lead team down. You were so helpful for us in unlocking that.
And the other part of that story that may have been true, and thank you for that. The other part of the story is I said I would have, the new website in 3 months, and it was, I don't know, maybe 5 years.
But it looked
So I
great.
delivered on that.
I remember
That's awesome.
Kim and I both were on staff before we joined the executive team, and we joined at the same time. And so we were like the two freshmen on the executive team. And I remember Kim and I like finding each other. I think it was on the first retreat, and I think we were like, Are you exhausted? Is this like a lot?" And you're like, "Yeah, it is a lot. Like, am I crazy, or is this just like a whole other thing trying to
I know,
sit
why
through
is this
a
so weird? This
9 hour
is really
meeting with
hard.
these people?" Yes.
I got
That's awesome.
shushed in my first executive meeting. I got shushed.
Oh, you did. That's right.
Yeah,
I,
that's
I
it's
hope
all
I
life
hope I know what
lessons.
here, but it
It
doesn't
doesn't
matter.
matter. I deserved it
All right.
as part of leveling up, right?
That's great. All right. Rob Wegner, bottom right on my screen.
Hey, yeah. So through the 90s, I was the youth pastor. We also did some young adult stuff with the Second Alternative, which was a little bit of like a church inside the church for a while. Then we shut it down and like just kind of rolled everybody into the rest of the life of the church. And then around the 2000, my role shifted more to taking the church to the city and to the world. And then I was a teaching pastor along the way.
It's very good. I was thinking when you said that, I flashed back to Exit 83. Was that the name of the thing for a while?
That was more like the party time.
Wow.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Those were the days. And Rob was on the team for 22 years. I think you were probably of those of us in this window, probably the longest.
Yes, sir. 22.
Yeah. So it's interesting when the first question I want to talk about is like kind of like why'd you first say yes? Like what was the pull? What was compelling? And I was reflecting on that for me when I was first like being asked about considering a role. There were more people on staff, and then sometime between then and when I came on staff, I think Rob, you were the only one left. There was like kind of a big upheaval in like 93-ish or something like that. And so
Yes.
yeah.
There was. And
Yes.
it happened the week of our wedding.
That's right.
No, it didn't.
No. Rob.
And the major players were both in the service. It was awesome.
Oh no.
Oh my.
I didn't know that.
That
I
was
didn't know that
intense.
either.
Little known fact.
Yeah. So Rob,
Wow.
you said yes first. What was it that made you say yes initially?
Yeah, I think one of the ways to summarize it, as I remember in the interview process one time, Michelle and I were sitting with Mark Beeson, and he said, I'm not really looking for pastors. I'm looking for missionaries who want to be a part of a kingdom outpost in Granger. And Michelle and I were Jesus freaks, and it was like, I'm in. I didn't really see myself as a pastor because, the prototypical picture of a pastor. And there was just a sense that this wasn't going to be another congregation that wanted to be a little bigger or a little better. It was really about creating a team or a space where people who are far from God can encounter Jesus in a way that was going to change their lives, that in a way that was going to make sense for them in their everyday lives. There was a sense of holy risk in the air that I wanted to be a part of. And it was about faith. It was about stepping into something bigger than myself. And, Michelle and I said yes, because we wanted to be a part of that story that would only make sense if Jesus was leading us and the power of the Holy Spirit showed up. And we had that sense that this wasn't going to just be church as usual.
And you guys said yes before you were married and then came and like started marriage and life together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, back in the cinema days.
Yeah. Kim, you said yes to to the church well before you said yes to staff. Unpack some of that for us.
Yeah. I was working with some people at the consulting firm I worked at. They went to Granger and they were always trying the invite approach. They tried the postcards, right? They tried the you should come to my church. It's a church for people like you. It's all the misses. It's what we think is. This is an example where things break down when the church hands you and tells you what to do to invite your friend, but they wouldn't give up, and I was turning it down. I was like, what, people like me, what? And like, church is a place for losers and people who can't make friends anywhere else. I'm doing good, right? But I was also a single mom, and these people I worked with were just like, really, they just loved me for the big mess I was, and they loved my daughter, and they also were sneaky. They were sneaky, and they offered to babysit my daughter and have her spend the night with their kids. And as I was pulling out of the driveway, they're like, just, you know what? Just meet us at church. We'll meet you there. You can get her there. And so they tricked me into coming. So I would have never stepped foot in the church, in the conventional. I wasn't like, but the second I stepped in, it was like nothing I had ever experienced before in a church, any type of congregation or safe place. And in that, it was like I didn't have to check my brain at the door. I didn't have to check the tools I was using on my job at the door. It wasn't a message of shame. It was a message of like, oh man, God created you to be like you. We just, let's all just keep getting better. Like, and it was plain language. It was relatable. It was human. And I was kind of gobsmacked with that. And so I just kept coming back. I came maybe once a month for a while. I was the holiest person in my friend group because I even went to church. Once a month was like I was ordained, you know. Well,
Hmm.
she's religious because I go to service once a month. But those friends, they challenged me. It's like, you don't grow in your faith coming once a month. You need to meet some people. Challenged me to try a volunteer team and not quit until I went 6 times. Um, and I took steps ever since then as a volunteer. I met my husband there. Um, Rob was a co-conspirator helping plan the engagement. And so I think it was it was unpredictable. It was very open. I wasn't shamed coming in smelling like alcohol. And I could leave that service that day and go apply something right then. And every time I came back, there was something I could apply. And that really was huge. And it never
That's cool.
stopped. Yeah.
Yeah. As you're talking, I was um, similar, but from the other side. I mean, you came kind of from a very unchurched environment. I came from a very highly churched environment where, you know, I'd been working in this ministry. We'd done these revival services in like 500 to 600 different churches. So, man, I knew church. And then I remember someone inviting me. It was actually Louis Clark. Some of you know Louis, invited me to, because he was coming down here to help out. I think volunteer, maybe teach. I don't remember. But and I'm like, he's like, man, this is nothing like you've ever seen. I'm like, what? Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Like, I didn't have space for anything new, but came down and just really like it completely changed my paradigm at that time in 1992 or three of church. Like I just started listening through the eyes and ears of someone like you, Kim, and it just completely opened up. And that's what pulled me in. It was a vision. I was working for this national ministry, and I remember a couple of the leaders there saying, "Why would you leave this national outreach ministry, you know, and go to a local church that has 250 people meeting in a freaking theater?" I don't think they said freaking.
No, they didn't.
They did not.
Because I know what ministry that was.
Yeah, you do. But I just remember saying, like, because I really believe this is a movement and this is going to have a greater impact than anything I can do with where I'm at now. And it pulled me in. So Waltz, you were in ministry and then ended up in South Bend, and you were you didn't come to South Bend to work at Granger Community Church. Tell us a little bit about your story.
So, yeah, I moved across the country back to Indiana, where we had been for all our growing up years, but hadn't been in northern Indiana, South Bend area. So actually, we moved so I could take a gig in retail. So I did that. I was buried, 70 hours a week, trying to get the store off the ground, which meant for the first time in all of our ministry church experiences, my wife and I, there was a season that I became known as Laura's husband, which she really loved because I wasn't around too much. So once we began attending, in fact, we had like 7 or 8 churches listed that we were going to visit, and we only ever visited Granger, and we stayed. I think what was compelling then was this notion that this was about people who weren't inside the 4 walls yet. That was where the intentional focus was, and I'd never been in a church or experienced that kind of intentional reach to a community. And when I was asked, I thought you'd say yes before anyone changed their mind. So
That's
was
pretty smart.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Waltz was running he completely turned around this men's clothing store because of like his heart and skill in like guest services and first impressions. And so that's when I think like planted deep in our DNA, like early on, was like, we don't need to find church professionals. We don't need to hire people from far away. Let's find people that are actually leading and doing something now in our community, bring them on the team and help us get better. And that's exactly what you were doing. And so, man, you took it from ground level to sky high in no time. Seemed like, I mean, I'm sure my numbers are skewed, but it seemed like we had like 20 people that, were standing at the door, greeting to like 400 volunteers in short order that were managing all these services on everything that was outside of the auditorium. And I think it produced the stickiness really during that season that we experienced. So cool. Jason Miller.
Interesting. Well, I was being invited to join Granger's team. This retail company sent my wife and I to the East Coast. They wanted us to look at a store out there and look at me being regional manager in that area. And so I had this invitation from Granger I was considering, and also this other invitation. And yeah, we decided to stay. There was some glamour and attraction to the East Coast, but we decided to make South Bend our home.
So for $1.99 an hour, stay and help build this church.
Yep.
Turn away a large salary. I'm glad you said yes. Jason, what was the pull for you?
The true answer was it was a good gig to begin
good.
with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a music kid and wanted to spend my life playing music and was trying to figure out how to do that. I had spent a couple of years interning at another church, the church I grew up in the area here, and was a music ed major and was trying to wrestle to the ground an early sense of calling to ministry leadership that I wasn't sure what to do with, but I knew I loved playing music with my friends. And at the time, so this is like my going into my junior year of college or right around then, I had some buddies and we would like play church camps like as a worship band. And most of those guys were also like volunteers at Granger. I had no connection to Granger, but there was I think an opportunity for like a youth worship intern. And so Corey Mann emailed, kind of cold called me and said, "You want to talk about it?" And at the time, I was waiting tables at Outback Steakhouse, which was actually, I loved that, but I was tired of the income irregularity. And so walking in, it was like, man, I love playing music with my friends. Seems like a cool place. Seems better than waiting tables. And then over the course of the next year, I kept vacillating between like, what is this place? Like Granger, like, is it a church? It defies almost all my categories. There's some things I really like about it, but I'm trying to sort it. And then somewhere along the way, I think what connected for me was that I was 16 years old when I first felt really called to serve the church vocationally. And then I immediately shelved that sense of calling. One of the several reasons that I did that, I think, is that, you're 16, you want to do something that matters with your life. And I'm really thankful for the churches I grew up in. They were full of good and genuine people who loved God and loved me. I did not see church as something that mattered in the world. Not something that moved anything or made a difference in the world. And then I realized, and I got to be careful here because this might have been happening when I was growing up and I just missed it. But I don't recall growing up. There's two things I never remember seeing. I never remember seeing a material need in the world being met by the church. Hungry people being fed, people without homes being given housing, just a material need being directly served by the church. And again, it might have happened, I might have missed it. And I also don't remember ever seeing an adult get baptized. I never remember seeing something other than a kid who's born in the church and raised in the church, reaches an age in the church where it seems like the next thing you do is get baptized. And I go to Granger and, you know, hundreds of people are getting baptized and thousands of people are being taken care of and a lot of needs are being met. And I went from like feeling called to the church, but being unreconciled to that calling because church didn't seem like it mattered. And then by grace and by an email from Corey, I ended up at a church that was making a real difference. And it went from confounding me to alluring me. And then next thing I know, I was there for quite a while.
I'd love to talk about the early years. Early's relevant, right? Because we all came at different times. But the years when everything was up and to the right. I was telling someone the other day, it was almost like, is it the verse about Joseph that says everything he touched turned to gold? Or that's my paraphrase, but it's like everything. I think there was 15 years in a row where we averaged 18% growth a year. And so it's like it was high growth season. So I'd love you guys to just, and we won't necessarily go around the horn here, but whoever just has thoughts about this on what were those high growth years like? And I'd love to like talk about both the good and the hard, the positive side of that and the shadow side of that. I'll just kind of pitch it off here by saying I came to Granger. I was 27 years old. I'd only ever had the one job at the nonprofit ministry, and I had not been to college, and had not had any church leadership experience. And so I remember those days of like, we're all like waking up every day and you're coming in and you're like, none of us have ever been here before. Like none of us have ever had to lead at this level doing these things. It's just like, it was crazy times of high growth. And that, to me, I'll just start, like for me, it did two things. One is in the healthy times, it gave you great reliance on the Spirit and on just, it's like, we can't figure this out on our own. We need help. The other side of that would be you get to be like, oh yeah, like we've got the scientific formula for how to build a church. Just come on, learn from us. Like we've got this thing figured out. Love to hear from you guys. What was that like for y'all?
I'll jump in and say my whole world was weekend services, first as a worship leader and then as a creative director and then as a teaching pastor. And that was certainly one of the places where you felt the adrenaline rush. I think when I started leading worship on the weekends, I think we did 6 services a weekend, 3 on Saturday, 3 on Sunday. I remember the first time I preached a weekend, and I still get emotional thinking about this, Rob, because Rob had been a teaching pastor and Rob was like big brotherly to me in all the best ways there. And so I preached, I think I did 5 services that weekend. I remember Monday morning, I'm laying in bed still sleeping and my phone rings and it's Rob on the line. And I'm kind of like, Rob, give me a break, man. And Rob, you were so wise and you said, hey, I want to let you know you're probably in for a really hard day. And if I recall, you said you're about to find out just how much you gave. And then you talked me through the shadows and temptations that come on the other side of that, like adrenaline riddled mountaintop feeling of preaching to thousands of people over 5 services and like what comes next. And so that's a distilled memory for me of like some of the consequence of all that momentum and effort. And then I remember at some point in the middle of all that, beginning to realize, oh, if I'm not careful, like it can feel like it's just how do we outdo each other this week? How does this weekend service become even more bombastic and amazing and titillating and exciting than the last weekends? Because it's like you gotta keep it going. And I'm not saying anybody else put that on me. It could be intrinsic in those environments, right? That just the feeling is we got to keep this going. And the way we keep it going is the next weekend's got to be even more exciting. And I remember really wrestling with that after a few years.
Yeah, I'd say, I had a similar sense. I mean, it was in some ways like being strapped to a rocket. It was totally exhilarating. I mean, every year, watching all these lives transformed, more baptisms, and it literally at times it felt like a miracle, like we're in the middle of a miracle in a cornfield. It's like I've never seen or experienced a congregation like this before. And that sense of sometimes like reverential awe, like, whoa, like I'm actually a part of this thing that God is doing that is so unusual. And so it's like riding a wave you can't control. And it's amazing. Because we've all been in like sleepy, insular churches. And that's like the primary experience for a lot of people, and good people who love God, and they're led by churches by people who are probably better people than we were.
Mhm.
And you're like, I get to be a part of this, and the joy of that. And then it also, is really seductive.
Mhm.
Just like, especially when we started getting all the beauty pageant awards, like fastest growing and most influential. And so many people are seeking us out for the expertise. It is like, for me, there was a lot of things that were unaddressed, like down in the basement of my soul, that I think it actually kept me from working on.
Mhm.
Because it's like, crack, cocaine. Like it can just keep you buzzing, and that's no one's fault but mine, you know.
Right.
And that's true in any whatever vocation you pick. I mean, success works that way. And one of the things I did appreciate about our team and the culture that we had, I always felt freedom though to like explore other like even contrary points of view to what we were doing. And because of that, it actually even led to what I'm doing today, which is so radically different from what we were doing. So those are some of the things that sort of stand out for me.
You know, Tim, you said something in that season of growth. None of us have ever been there before. And that's part of what was really good about it, because nobody was saying you can't do that. Nobody was saying it's got to be done this way. We were at the beginning of an era where we were breaking our father's church. Now our church is being broken. Like we need to take our turn, right? Yeah, we get to see these life cycles, but we got to come of age right there. And so it was just this blank slate. And it's like, let's go do it. And we were young enough and we had enough adrenaline and enough like we didn't know what we didn't know, and it was so fun to build something. And that was a really, really good thing. We didn't have all the pressure of preservation, and that was really, really cool. I did not have a platform position, so I wasn't a public face, and so but it was no less addictive. It's very, very addictive to keep up, right? Like the acceleration and just the pressure to keep up and not say no. And like you said, being attached to the rocket. Uh, I think we were all, whether we would label this may be the wrong label, but it sure is how we were all performing. I mean, we were achievers, right? And none of us were going to be like, you know what? Let's just like, no, like we're not, I'm not going to be the one to drop the ball. Are you going to be the one to drop the ball? No, I'm going to outrun you. No, I'm going to outrun you. You know what? Watch me. I'm going to outrun you. We did not want to let each other down. And the growth that was coming around, you feel like more's on your shoulders than there is, you know. It's just that's really addictive. And it wasn't until years later that I saw the trade-offs I made. To your point, Rob, like I wish I had ate better and went to counseling way earlier than I did. And I think, but part of this was coming of age. I think all of us kind of came of age during that era as well. So the building something with no fences was really, really cool. And being the part of the turn of what that particular generation was looking for that season, we got to try some things. And it was kind of like the Beverly Hillbillies, man. We hit some gold. It was like, and then we were just like kind of guessing, you know, and so that was really good.
I'll have to put a link in here to the Beverly Hillbillies for most of the people watching that won't have any idea what it is.
That's cool.
Mark?
I'd been in lots of spaces where I didn't know what I was doing.
So that was familiar.
But yeah, no, but the point is to share that with a team of people who are looking at each other and saying, we've never been here before. We don't know what we're doing. We're going to figure this out together. That was really formative as a team, to bring reliance and dependence on each other, to call creativity out of each other. And no one, well, I didn't feel the pressure that had to all be it wasn't on my shoulders. I think you just referenced that, Kim. Yeah, but to your point, Rob, what was going on inside, I gave all the hours. I remember early on being at the building late one weeknight, and I wasn't in the band, so I had no reason to be there for rehearsal, right? I was just there, and another staff member walked out in the hall and said, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Stuff to do. It's just a really intense season." The staff person said, "You know, this season is going to be followed by another season, which will be another season, and then one after that. So you've got to figure out how you're going to handle the season, because you can't give this much the way you're giving it." And it wasn't until years later that I saw how my sense of loyalty to my team was at times even greater than my loyalty to my family.
Yeah.
Even in a space where we were encouraged and celebrated to spend time with family, it was still too easy to find all the sense of loyalty and sense of belonging with this team who had this thrill of a lifetime together.
I found, like, again, I was also not a platform speaker, so I didn't have that spotlight, but what was addictive and maybe toxic, I don't know, was the, people around the country that were coming and just saying, what are you guys doing? Like, this would make sense if it was in Chicago or Houston or Atlanta. This does not make sense in a cornfield in Indiana. And part of that was like cool because it's like, okay, only God, right? But let us tell you the 4 steps to get this to happen exactly the same where you're at, so it was, and that piece of it. And I think, like, innocently at first, like, there was a sense of, someone asked me a couple weeks ago about wired churches and like, when did you guys start writing books and all this stuff? And they said, but that was really strategic. And I said, actually, it wasn't strategic at first. It was just sanity. It's like we were getting so many calls and emails from people like wanting our time that it's like, we got to like focus this on 3 days a year, and then 4 days a year. So we had to focus it. And then it's like, okay, let's just develop some resources. Let's put some staff on it. So, because we got to keep cranking out these Sundays in our local ministry here. So I don't think it was strategic at first. It became strategic, and I don't have any regrets. I'm glad we did it. But I was at a church recently that's experiencing similar growth that we experienced, and their leaders are about the age we were. And super excited for them, and also like, oh, I'm sorry. Like, just a sense of like that pace. And I remember it, and I remember the burn of the spotlight at times. What would you guys say, either encouragement or caution, to leaders that are leading right now in a church that's experiencing similar things as we were experiencing then, similar growth, similar pace, similar weight? What would you say?
I think what I said a moment ago about my loyalty being greater at times to my team and our cause had a lot to do with me finding my identity in what I was doing. And when that wasn't, I remember at one time having some responsibility shifted, changed, and it was a soul punch for me because it was so much part of my identity. And so I'd say be cautious, make time, take time. You won't find it. You have to take it, to pay attention to your own soul, your own well-being. Know your identity rests someplace outside of what you're actually doing.
That's good.
Yeah, I'd say, like, to those who are on the platform, I would say that is not a neutral space. It is actively destroying your soul. And if you aren't super intentional, it will, without you even knowing it, begin to degrade you. And it's going to take a lot of intentionality. You won't even know it. Like, people come into that room and there's a social contract and they want to eat you, and there's a part of you that wants to eat the sheep. And you're gonna have to be super intentional. You need silence and solitude more than you know. You need to confess your sin to few trusted people more than you know. You need to find like your sacred pathways and be more extravagant about those than you probably think you need to be. And you need to do the work, like get down in the basement as soon as you can. It's hard to do that when you're in your 20s or even in your 30s, but as soon as you can, like, get back into your story, because there's a lot of the reasons you're doing what you're doing, a lot of your strengths are coming out of your hurt and your woundedness. And the sooner you can, like, let Jesus go to those places, the more redemptive it's going to be. So I'd tell them that. It'd be super encouraging.
Rob, I
That's good, Rob.
remember in some of my insane seasons, just some of those pure adrenaline and being at the church all the time. And, we can lie to ourselves and we can get the count. We're trying, we think we're doing it. And like you said, in the 30s, the pressure cooker years of life. I remember people would say that to me and I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I take days off, I love my family. I don't miss a single cross country meet, but now with hindsight, I'm realizing some things that I wish I could have accessed practically that I would say to people. And it's just like, if you don't know how to find those sacred pathways, if you don't know how to find your basement, all that stuff, then the first thing you can do is, gosh, just diversify the voices that get some objective voices. Like if you're all just breathing the same oxygen, I mean, I'm not just talking about people on staff, or I'm talking like outside your church in different walks of life and different generations and different belief systems. It's like, just have a little sound check, right? Because I prided myself on being like the outsider advocate. I prided myself being on the fringe, but man, it takes like a hot minute before you're assimilated, even when you try not to be. And
Yeah.
so I may have been the least assimilated, but I was assimilated and I got weird and I couldn't see it. I would only listen and read certain things and I just got real homogenous, and you lose your objectivity. It suffocates wisdom, your ability to hear it, and I just wish that I wish that I had a little bit more. It doesn't mean every day. And I thought I was being intentional, but I wasn't. I was still really curating this like narrow lane of like-minded people. And I think that kind of got distorted because I think I could have been more objective and held up the mirror better with just some different voices. Doesn't mean I give them authority in my life. It just like that Holy Spirit and like God can help me make through this. But when I'm only hearing from one track, makes it really hard to hear, you know? So I think that might have helped a little bit.
That's good.
And organizationally, again, this is a hindsight thing, but I would say it is an encouragement to leaders. If there's anybody that's in this, and again, it's easier said in hindsight, and I could do this now. I think all of us could do this now because we're older. We have less to lose. You're proving more, it's just, you can take just a season of life. You can be a little bolder in things, but organizationally, when it's growing like that, sometimes it's growth at all costs and the cost isn't worth it. The intention of taking a second for some building years, and our programs grew like wildfire, but we didn't keep up with our people development. And we didn't keep up with our shepherding, because we were trying to keep up with the programs. We did our best. It wasn't like we took the hands off the wheel. We did our best, but we didn't intentionally have building years. And that takes some bold trade-offs to say, we're going to sacrifice the double digit this year so we can just do staff emotional safety training or staff counseling but we didn't know what we didn't know. But as I study organizations that experience growth like that, the ones that implode are the ones that don't stop for the building years and the repair years before they grow again. And the ones that sustain are the ones that get simpler as they grow, and the ones that stop for a second and build. And that's something we wouldn't have known because we weren't organizational. We weren't CEOs. We weren't COOs. We were on the rocket. But because we have that hindsight, I wish somebody had been able to talk to us as a leadership team and say, it's worth it. Take a year where you don't add a new thing, take some stuff away, and really just invest in the people who are already here, because exponentially they're going to fuel the next wave of growth.
Yeah. And some of that's the actual thing that you're building requires growth to sustain what you built. I just remember we did 8 back-to-back financial, campaigns partially because we just had to keep it going to keep paying what we'd already done. And the only way to keep it going, to keep paying, to keep the momentum is to build something else. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have built those things. I'm just saying it was kind of like eventually that thing has to mature and sustain. And if a local church or local expression is going to last for generations. And so that was, I think, a little bit of like, we actually can't slow down. I think that was, I don't know if we ever said that. I just like in hindsight, I think it was a sense of like, we actually can't slow down because we have to keep sustaining this thing. It's, it's the whole movement thing that turns into a institution that then needs preserved, which we were saying at the time about the United Methodists because we were part of them. But I think we were starting to experience that ourselves too.
We sure were.
Yep, we were.
I think to your question, Tim, I feel so resonant with everything everyone just said. And then in harmony with all of it, I would say just be wary that like in the milieu that we've all grown up in, the whole world we live in, the water we're swimming in, like everything has formed us to just equate quantity and quality.
Mm-hmm.
So more is better. That's the equation in the West, in America, and whatever. And I just would ask people like, how are you going to test the quality, the character of the community? How would you even know, right? I mean, I still wrestle with that. I'm still pastoring. Every day I wonder, how would I even understand the character of the community that I'm serving? Paul talks about like our work will be tested by fire, and some will be revealed to be made of straw. And I notice even today when I meet other pastors, and it breaks my heart. It is like 99% of the time I meet any other pastor from any context, period. And hey, we're both pastors. Say, tell me about your church. And the first thing they tell me is their weekend attendance. And small churches, big
Mm.
churches, American churches, churches in Africa, churches in Europe. I notice this everywhere, and it breaks my heart. And I think I understand why that happens because of the environment we're in. But I'm like, and then when I get asked, I'm trying to do everything I can. Like, you're gonna have to pry that number out of me because I want to do everything I can to say the way I describe my church is the character of our community. What are our shadows and what are we growing into? And I just would, so I'm so resonant with like our own journey as we lead. Do the shadow work, be aware that this is really dangerous for your soul unless you are doing the same kind of work that Jesus allowed to happen in him when he goes in the wilderness. And then also I would just say like, really think hard about how you're going to think about the nature of your congregation and how would you decide if like what you're doing is good or not. And if your first answer is the number of baptisms last year, I just think I'd say, maybe, right? But maybe we better have other ways of testing the character of what we're creating. And sorry, one more thought on that. And Kim, you kind of alluded to this, but I think I would say like, um, in my reading of the Gospels and the New Testament, if you really want to know the character of what you're creating, you somehow have to listen to people who aren't easily centered in what you're creating, whether
Right.
it's in the power structures or on the executive team. I remember I had this one aha moment where, as far as I know, the whole time I was at Granger, we would have said we have an egalitarian theology for women and men in leadership. And I love that. And I think we really meant it. I saw that sincerely held conviction. And I remember in spite of that one day, and I think it was toward the end of my time, I think there was a point where the lead team had 13 people on it, and it was 12 men and one woman. And I just remember thinking, like, wait, what's the disconnect between a proclaimed theological value and then the reality of who's in this room right now? And then I thought about things like some of our policies around boundaries for men and women in meetings and stuff. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, well, I know for me, when I was leading creative, the real conversation wasn't happening at 3 p.m. in our meeting room. The real conversation was we'd kill rehearsal at like 11 p.m. some nights. And I'd look at a couple other guys I worked with and be like, man, you guys exhausted. Should we get some beers and some food? And as a matter of policy, I couldn't have just extended that invite to a married woman on our team. And you're like, well, then of course that's how we end up here, right? I just use that as an example of beginning to like ask more questions about how is this thing serving people and what's it doing in people's lives and how are we going to like plumb that to see what its fruit is beyond the numbers that are so easy to grab.
Can I just say one more thing? Because that just
Yes,
reminded me
please.
of something. I think it all relates, but it's kind of like the learnings. this is more, I think I'm speaking for me. I see it in other places, but I'm not saying I can't speak for anybody on this call, but I know that I was really bought into doing something important, something bigger than me, anchored in faith, in a healthy faith, a growing faith. But I also digested the line that the church had the most important job in society, when really God is at work everywhere. God has purposes in our society with educational institutions and hospitals, and medical institutions and public service and our local government. And I would just go to church conferences and listen to other pastors. Was like, there's nothing harder than ministry. Ministry is the hardest thing out there. It's like, you know what? And I believe that, right? But now that I've been out of vocational paid church ministry for a while, I'm like, you know what? Public service is pretty hard. You know what? Corporate healthcare is pretty hard. You know what? Education is pretty hard. And the church, especially as we were in that growing 90s, 2000s, we kind of hunkered down and built our little meccas and weren't doing a good job. Now, Rob, you were breaking walls and trying to build those things, the partnerships with our community members, but like as an institution, church institution, it was just easier. We could create and make whatever we wanted because we were the hope of the world. And the church has a place to partner, and I missed that and put a lot more weight on the singular focus of the church, uh, and subconsciously didn't pay attention to the all the major institutions that the church is supposed to be partnering with, which I have a regret on that. I felt stupid when I look back at it now. Ministry was hard, but I think school administration might be harder because at least at our church, we all kind of had the same faith. We were kind of heading the same direction. So anyway, that's just one other thing I would probably add. It may not have articulated it well, but I think you get the gist.
You did.
That's good. So we'd be remiss to not talk about the fact that we had some years of decline, like where we couldn't figure things out, right? So I think, as my memory is, like around 2006 was kind of our peak. And we were in the spring of that year bumping 7,000. I think we went over 7,000 like twice. We were in the 6,000 squarely. And then it just started a slow decline. And like my memory of that was like we were a bit what's the word, panicked, I think might be the best word, because we hadn't experienced it. Like everything had been up to the right. It had just completely worked. And probably from the time the train wreck happened when you were getting married, Rob, from that point all the way to 2006.
Let's just remind people the marriage wasn't the train wreck.
No.
Just be careful about that.
Marriage is still great, as far as I know. Yeah. But and then we started like pulling levers. And then I think it was like a sense of like we're just pulling all the levers and you don't know what's working and what's not working and I think in those seasons too, you start pointing fingers. Like it's because this person's not doing that, or that person's not doing this, or this person failed at that, or whatever. I don't know. I don't think any of that was out loud, but I do think there was a sense of panic in those seasons. How do you guys reflect on those years of decline that were probably 5 to 6 years?
This may be a real overstatement, but in those years 2000 to 2006, when I was first on staff, I was able to ride the growth wave with the whole team while trying to help people connect outside of that service. And I think when the decline started, it was when I realized that I didn't have a handle at all on how to do this thing, and connecting people. I think the wins I experienced were with the team overall, but when it came down to my own responsibility, my sense of the charge, I was scrambling like I suppose every growing church was in the country, trying to figure out what is this connection, group, life on life. What does that even look like? How do you do that? And I think there was more than one conversation about how people weren't connected, and I felt such tremendous weight and even a sense of guilt
Like you're the
that
pastor of
there weren't
connections.
better relationships to hold people together, not a movement or a project or yeah.
Yeah.
One of
I
my most visceral, sorry, go ahead, Ken.
no, you go ahead, Jason.
One of my most visceral memories from that is when we had to do layoffs.
Ugh.
And I just remember just the collective pain. Obviously, first and foremost, for those who ended up unemployed, who lost their jobs. And then there's the survivor guilt. And I think there was such a thick camaraderie that we had in so many parts of our staff culture, that camaraderie even just intensified the pain of that moment. I just that week is like etched into my memory. Um, and I think it was probably compounded by the feeling that, like, I know for me, like y'all said, same thing. It's like the minute I walked in, ride the rocket ship. And so I think um that week felt like, I mean, layoffs are really hard. Um, but I think it was maybe even a lot harder because it was just like, who would have imagined? All we ever did was, even to the point that, like, I realized at some point, and this is not, nobody else would have done this. This is just me and my unhealth and immaturity. But if you have a culture problem on your team, but you're hiring every year, you can sometimes just kind of hire your way out of that problem,
That's right.
you know? Even if you don't have the guts to confront the problem, and even if those people are still there, they just become a smaller part of the team. And this is obviously a terrible way to lead. But all of a sudden, like, even that's an example where, like, that stops working when you stop growing. And then all of a sudden, maybe what seemed like, oh wow, we know what we're doing and we're leading and all that, like, you realize that some part of what looked like your success, to your point, Mark, was a function of just the numerical growth. And then you're left kind of just exposed to some things.
Hmm.
I definitely saw some things exposed in the ways I was leading that might not have ever been exposed until we turned that corner.
It
Yeah,
was
and go ahead.
go ahead, Mark.
The one area of connections that like thrived, Tim, you mentioned a minute ago, was this whole guest service first impressions area that I felt like I was winning at until we were in decline, and all the motivation, all the things I'd communicate and train volunteers around growth and what's happening and who's coming and how it's so critical and important, when that stopped or began to decrease, um, it was really difficult. I had to dig deep to find, how am I motivating? How am I leading? What's the vision I'm casting for these folks who have rallied for this growing movement, and now it's not. Which was one more time where I had to look back now and pay attention to how much of that was about me and measuring, am I winning or not, um, by what I'm leading. So yeah.
Um, for me, y'all know, the journey in Southern India and experiencing a different form of the church have been so formative. And God's Spirit enlivens and empowers all forms of the church. But that whole season, it was part of a conversion for me of seeing the strengths and the weaknesses of that form of the church. And there was a lot of angst,
Yeah.
and a lot of sadness. And I mean, just to be honest, it was like, man, I wish we could just stop being obsessed with growing
Rob, I was waiting my turn because I've never said this out loud. It was a tricky, complicated season because we had built this thing together. And I, it was crushing to see people lose their jobs and to see things that they were that we had all built and grown together and were living together. And that was kind of as a leader and as a family member, that was really hard. But secretly, as a human being, I was so glad it was breaking so we
Mm,
could rebuild something fresh.
mm,
I in my private life, I was like, scarcity breeds clarity. We need clarity again. What are the principles that stand true through every season, every generation? What is being asked of us now? But it was tricky because that's when we were not all on the same
Yeah,
page,
we just weren't
right?
on it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that was complicated. So it was a painful end, and that's when we were forced to reckon with the end of ourselves, and that's a very individual journey. And so some of those private thoughts, like the angst you had, Rob, I had a different angst. It's like, I don't want these people I love to break, but I'm so glad this is breaking. Can we take a freaking minute?
mm,
Can we see what is, but to your point, Tim, it's like once you build this institution, how do you keep running the lights? How do you keep paying people? How do you cover these families' insurances? And then it gets like, right. And so that's why for every season. So I was grateful. I hated the pain, but I was grateful. And I thought, oh, cool. We're gonna get to rebuild something new. And that just never, we tried.
We tried.
But I wonder, I mean, I don't know. I'm still watching, studying other churches and organizations. Can you really launch a new vision with the same people? I mean, I
mm.
don't know.
It's a good
I don't
question.
know. And I know we tried and we tried to bring new voices, but it was still the same people, right? And so sometimes you just got to get out of the way. And sometimes, you know, uh, things move, the ground moves underneath you, or you're moved. And uh, one of there's so many things, but one of the things that I will not forget, Mark Beeson said to me when I was leaving the staff at Granger, he just said, "Hey, Ken, God calls us to serve in different ways on different days." And I just like really held on to that, and I wish I'd heard that sooner, because I was like, till death do us part. And that was never anywhere, right? Like so yeah, Rob, I'm glad you said that out loud. I'd never said out loud that secret thought I had where I was like, I'm glad this is breaking because then we can see what's left and what are we supposed to do now. And we sure tried. We sure tried.
We did.
Yeah, one of the regrets I have, like in the growth years, we would often say, people vote by their attendance and their pocketbook. So you don't like something, you vote by stop giving or stop coming. And to me, like it was such, like in hindsight, it was such a cocky, insensitive, non-pastoral thing to say. Like, if you don't like it, just leave because we don't need you and we don't need your money because this thing's going on without you. And then, and then you fast forward to like when we're in decline and we're asking everyone, like, what do you think? What should you do? It's like suddenly we care.
Mm.
And I'm speaking for myself, but that was that's something that's like, how do you, because churches will, especially new churches will experience growth and God will do things there and sometimes in pretty significant ways. And so how do you do that? And plenty of churches do. So this is not an unanswered question, but I don't think I did that well or in my season of just like, how do we listen? And because the Spirit of God's alive in all of us, right? So it's not just talking through the senior leadership team. So I wish I had listened more in those early years. Hey, I want to say too, just in case they're listening or tuning in, a couple folks from our leadership team are not here anymore. Mark Beeson's not here. So Sheila, if you're watching, listening, I just want to say, man, obviously the reason all of us gave our lives to this for, in some cases, decades, is because of the work that you and Mark did to plant this thing and launch it. And about a year ago from when this thing will air, Tony left us. And so, Emily, if you're listening, we just so loved walking beside him, and what a man of God. I learned so much from Tony to this day that still, it was fun doing life with him. So just honor you. And I know your family's still working through this and will be for years to come, but our hearts and prayers are with you.
Can
go
I
ahead,
just
Jason.
jump on that, just because I've been like Mark's been in my mind here as we're talking. And I mean, if anybody knew Mark, he's a force of nature. He's larger than life. He's charismatic. I've never known a more charismatic personality, a better encourager. But I've been lead pastoring now for, I guess, 9 years. And I'm 9 years in, and there are still moments where I have a kind of pastoral quandary in my heart. Sometimes it's just the heaviness of a thing our church is facing, or a hard Sunday where the congregation's hurting, or whatever. And there are moments when, like, Mark's something, quite literally, that he said to me, that he shared with me, that like comes back to me, that in the moment he shared it with me, it mattered, and I appreciated its wisdom. And now, 10 years into leading a church that looks very, very different from Granger, and difference is not always critique, but it's very different. I'm still struck by the moments when I realize at a whole new level, like the wisdom he was giving me and the deep place that it came from, and his love for the church and his commitment to the project and all that. And so, and we're all complicated, and larger than life leaders are complicated. And Mark had a really hard job too. And we could go on and on, but I just have been kind of sitting here, even as we reflect on our own relationship to our work at Granger, I'm also been thinking about what he meant to me.
I would love to let our listeners or viewers, which I'm hoping we have more listeners than viewers, because the sun's been in my eyes for the last half hour and I can't even see. So
It's been
those of you
fun
that
watching you like dip and dodge it.
trying to dodge the sun rays. Yeah.
And then Mark's been like waving at the light sensor in the room he's
Keep the
in.
lights on. Yeah.
I have not seen that.
Tim's retinas are permanently burned.
I will not be able to see for days. But just give a quick overview of what you're doing now. And I think what you're doing now is what I'm doing now is informed by my years at Granger. So you can connect the dots there if you want. But Jason, I'll start with you. You just kind of talked about it a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm in South Bend, Indiana, pastoring a church called South Bend City Church that we formed in 2016, 2017. And just like a couple of notes on that, and back to, I'm trying to remember to tell this story because it is remarkable that when I felt called to leave Granger to plant South Bend City Church, and I knew for a lot of reasons that it would be different enough that it wouldn't make sense for it to be part of the GCC project. Just knew where I was feeling called theologically and otherwise. And I remember at the time, Mark Waltz, you were actually our executive pastor. So I sat down with you and processed the news, and then had my lunch with Mark to tell him I'm leaving to plant a church 7 miles from GCC. And in Mark's best way, I mean, for a couple hours, he tried to not talk me out of it. He wondered if we could do it together. And he kept coming at it from different angles. And I didn't want to hash out all the different, I didn't want to say, I just didn't think I'd be productive. But once he realized he wasn't moving me, I won't forget, he just kind of pounded the lunch table and he said, we're going to help you. And, Mark stood up in front of Granger and put his arm around me and said, Jason's doing this, and we're not doing it. It's separate, but we're going to help him. And he led the GCC to give our new church a gift that was enough to sustain my life for a year. And he kept me on staff preaching weekends at Granger while I was doing vision meetings during the week for the new church. And I remember talking to a pastor friend in Nashville and telling him the news, and I told him about Granger and leaving. And he's like, it's great, man. That's great. And he said, wait, how far is South Bend from Granger? And I said, 7 miles. And he goes, oh. because anybody who knows this world knows that can feel competitive, and Mark's not naive. He knew that people were going to come with me and donors were going to come with me, but I never saw him flinch from that commitment to bless it. And Mark wasn't naive that I was going someplace that he wasn't going to go, in some ways. So we lead a church in South Bend. We have the great joy of, among our membership and leadership, Ken Meyer, Mark Waltz, and Tim Stevens on our board. We're very grateful for that. We're right in the heart of the city of South Bend, which is a beautiful city with um, a lot of things it's teaching me about what it means to follow Jesus in the real world with lots of real people, and I love that.
Yeah, and I think you guys have redefined for me what it means to be a city church, a church in the city, and a church for the city, more than any church I've ever been a part of. So very cool. Mark Waltz, what are you doing now?
So I'm serving as executive director with a nonprofit that is fantastic mission, caring for families of medically fragile children who are often unseen, invisible in our culture. So providing a space where these children get an overnight or 2 or 3 or 4 while their families get away to find respite and renewal, because caring for a child with those complexities means you're on 24/7. You don't get a break. And so we're not from our foundation, a faith organization, but love and faith and grace runs through everything we're doing. And it's really remarkable to be part of. We are a specialty hospital, so there's a bunch of stuff I'm still learning. Somebody said to me a year ago, "You're going to help lead a hospital." I'm like, no, I'm not. So yeah, and I still for a few years after leaving Granger, I did some consulting work, and I still really enjoy working with church leaders and other leaders around identity and wellness. Leaders pour into care for people, typically say things to others that is really hard to practice for themselves. And so I still gain a lot of gratification from doing that some still. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Waltz. Rob, what are you doing?
I'm here in Kansas City, and I'm one of the directors in the Kansas City Underground. And we organized as a mission agency. Our mission is to fill Kansas City with the beauty, justice, and good news of Jesus. So we help ordinary people discover what we call their masterpiece mission, the unique thing that Jesus made them to do, and the particular people and the particular place that Jesus has sent them to, and to help them in that place become a disciple maker and to see an extended spiritual family emerge. So we want to see a disciple maker in every street and an extended spiritual family in every network of relationships in Kansas City, so that people can experience gospel flourishing everywhere in our city. And that's what we're up to.
So cool. And you're doing a lot of work, I think, helping spark movements in other places as well, which is really cool. Yeah. Kim?
I am running a boutique consulting agency and pull together a group of people, and we're out just helping organizations and churches and nonprofits and businesses just operationalize their vision and their communication systems, and just organize things just with more clarity and just a little bit more health, so I tell people nobody knows this, but like I'm an organizational like therapist, but nobody knows this. They hire me. Hey, you know what? We need to fix our communications. Like, you got it while I'm here. So that's been really,
That's
really
because you
fun.
did it with all of us years ago. So
Yeah, it's been really great. So I like the variety. The team of people that I get to work with, they're all ages, so I keep learning, which is really good. I'm not getting crusty, and I don't have to have all the answers, and that's just really, really cool. And I learn something new every day. So
Love it.
But I like the boutique side of things, keeping things small, overhead low. I get to work with some good people. I'm still burnt out from operational full-time responsibility. I'm still burnt out. And I that was sure fun, but I really like this.
Yeah. I
I
was
like
telling
getting
someone the
behind,
other day.
yeah,
Yeah.
getting behind them who's carrying it and giving them some encouragement, giving them some fuel, giving them some sanity, giving them some real talk. And how can I get behind them and say something that they're not hearing somewhere else? I get so much joy out of that. And I'm so glad I'm not carrying it.
Yeah.
But Tim, what were you going to say?
No, similar. It's just, you know, I started doing this full time 2 years ago, helping church leaders and organizational health around teams. And I was like, why did I not start doing this 10 years ago? But at the same time, I needed that 8 years of just more refining and experience,
Yeah,
and
you weren't gray
turns
enough.
around the sun. I wasn't gray enough. So no one says that anymore. Thank you guys. Really, really appreciate it. I know there's a lot of leaders that are listening to this or watching this that will be impacted. Often we hear the glory stories when everything is up and to the right, and for us to be able to unpack some of the shadow side of that and hopefully help some leaders that are in the middle of that or experiencing that, I think is super valuable. So appreciate y'all's time.
Good seeing you guys. Really good.
Great,
Thank you.
great
Yeah.
being with you.
Well, thanks for listening to Tim's interview with the Granger OGs. Want to remind you to go to leadingsmart.com where you can download all 40 lessons in our ebook, 40 Lessons in 40 Years. And Tim, I wanted to ask you to actually tell us about our next episode. Tee us up.
Final
Yeah, our final episode of season
So this
2.
will be episode 12. And, you know, we've been focusing this whole season on 40 lessons from 4 decades of ministry and trying to pass along what could be helpful for you in your ministry roles. And so this one, I'm going to share some of the internal postures, practices, rhythms that have kept me grounded to whatever degree I've been grounded, you know, kept me joyful, kept me from getting jaded, kept me hopeful in the last 4 decades. And that's not easy to do. And it's nothing you never spike the ball or check the box on it. It's something you work out every day. So we're going to dive into that.
It's awesome. Can't wait to hear it. All right, we'll see you there. Episode 12.